I feel so embarrassed about needing to tell this dean that I need his myomectomy. He said, use the word uterus, vagina. It will make him super uncomfortable. and it'll be fine. And I did.
And he would argue with you.
It was really, he really got squirmy. He's like, okay, wait, how much time you need?
Take 7 weeks.
Take 7 weeks.
From the news team at LinkedIn, I'm Jessi Hempel, and this is Hello Monday. It's our show about work on our own terms. Most women and people with ovaries will go through menopause somewhere between the ages of 45 and 55. And the thing about that age range, right, is it's right at the moment that most of us will also move into the most senior leadership roles we'll have in our careers. And yet, we mostly don't talk about this stuff at work. There are very few accommodations, almost no conversations, very few policies that are designed to support this. We just keep quiet. When I was getting ready for this episode, I heard about this one woman in a very senior role who used to keep a towel and a change of clothes under her desk, and she told no one. And here's the thing, no one is served by that silence. Really, no one. The more we erase that stigma, the more we empower each other to step into our strength and into our confidence. And talking about menopause at work is not just about an individual decision. It is the way that we make the workplace better for every person at every stage of their career. So today, here in our studio, we are breaking that silence. Welcome to the Menopause Conversation. Joining me today in the studio are two incredible women who have built careers at the very highest levels of business. Natalie Nixon is a creative strategist. You've heard her before on the show, and she's going to tell us today about how she went into menopause very unexpectedly and quite early after she had surgery for fibroids in her early 40s. Anne Marie Squeo was sitting in the C-suite of a Fortune 500 company that you have definitely heard of, Xerox, when she went into menopause. And there was no roadmap for what happened next. Together, the three of us are going to talk about how we navigate menopause at work. We'll talk about how we can support each other better. And you know, the most amazing thing happened for both of my guests today when they went through this transition. They up-leveled their careers. We're going to talk about that and so much more. Let's get into it.
The way I describe my menopause story is that it was this trifecta on the one hand of sadness, embarrassment, and shame. And on the other hand, relief and a reckoning. And we could talk more about why I frame it that way. It was something that I didn't have real words or language for, especially because the early onset menopause, which was surgically induced after having a myomectomy, which is like a C-section without the kid at the end, right? A bear of a recovery. Even having to explain to my dean why I would be needing a 6-week leave. My husband said, I feel so embarrassed about needing to tell this dean that I need his myomectomy. He said, use the word uterus, vagina. It will make him super uncomfortable. and it'll be fine. And I did.
And he would argue with you.
It was really, he really got squirmy. He's like, okay, wait, how much time you need?
Take 7 weeks.
Take 7 weeks. So the surgically induced menopause triggered by the myomectomy. The myomectomy was necessary because I was suffering with uterine fibroid tumors. And that is what eventually led my doctor to say, you've got to get your head wrapped around surgery. I was trying herbs and stretching and exercise and acupuncture and, was terrified to have surgery. But it got to a point where it was going to compromise the health of my other organs.
Natalie, was this your entire adult life?
No.
No,
so I started menstruating when I was 12 years old. I didn't even know what Midol or Advil were until I hit my 30s. So I never got cramps. I got really moody, probably like clockwork a week before I started my menstrual cycle. But I never had any kind of physical ailment. And then I hit my 30s, and when I would go for my annual with my OBGYN, that's when we started noticing small fibroids like the size of a pea, and then got to the size of a grape. And we said, well, we'll keep an eye on it. And by the end, the surgeon removed 11 tumors from my womb. And at the post-op, he said to me, and he had no bedside manner. He was a surgeon, which is kind of what you want when you need that kind of surgery.
You want him to be very good at the thing you want him to do.
Exactly. He wasn't real warm and fuzzy, but he leaned into me and he said, Natalie, we had to make so many incisions on your uterus that I think it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to conceive. And so I'm 41 and got married when I was 39 and always had this dream and vision that I would have like 5 kids. And it's a whole other story, which we could get into later, about how I reckoned with that.
Yeah.
But I was, for a lot of reasons, emotionally and mentally, I was at peace with that. I was happy to be getting better. And I have an incredible stepdaughter who, had I had children biologically of my own, the kid would have been Sydney's age.
Natalie, I just want to stop us here a second. Give you a little bit of space for the fact that you took all that in like a year of your life, that huge identity shift that goes with a sort of shift in perspective on whether you're going to become a biological mother, whether your health is going to be resolved, and then surprise, you are in menopause. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But Anne Marie, I want to invite you into this conversation. And I want to say that the most interesting thing to me about talking about menopause is that there is no one experience of it, or at least not one that I have heard so far. So where does it begin for you?
There are similarities. For me, it started at 53. And similarly, I talk about a trifecta because it was 2020. I was the chief brand and communications officer at Xerox. And, the pandemic had hit. My team and myself were under enormous pressure to change all the plans that had been put together for the year for marketing products and communicating to employees around the world and all of that. So a job that was already intense got exponentially more intense.
And I'm just going to stop here and say, you're 53, you're in the C-suite of a Fortune 500 company. This is the pinnacle. When people talk about climbing the ladder, you'd hand over hand over hand, and now you're at the top of a ladder. And it's also 2020.
It's 2020. So the world's gone crazy, work's gone crazy, and my body's gone crazy. So later that same year, around October 2020, menopause really hits. And for me, my main symptom was chronic insomnia, which was insane. So, there were weeks when maybe I had 5 or 6 hours of sleep a week. I
don't know, how can you do that?
I think back now and I wonder how I functioned. I don't know how I did it. To be honest with you, and I was working easily 80 or 90 hours a week.
Did you know that that's what it was right away?
I did.
Here we are.
Yeah. Because I had actually been testing it every couple of years with my OBGYN. So they were like, you are in menopause now. So I went off the pill, which I had been on for endometriosis for 30 years. So, and it was immediate.
Yeah.
The next day, I stopped sleeping and I didn't sleep pretty much for 2 years, which was insane. And it impacted everything about my life, right? There was really you had to, if you're not sleeping,
right,
now you've got to just conserve whatever energy you have for work. Because otherwise you can't get through the day and you can't really exercise and you can't really serve any creative energy.
Well, Anne Marie, just to jump in here, I think the 2025 version of me would say, well, go get some meds.
So, yeah, okay. This is a great part of this conversation. I was scared because there's so much misinformation out there about hormone therapy and the study that had happened in the early 2000s that really scared many, many women off any kind of hormone replacement therapy and turned out to be pretty inaccurate. And so for 2 years, I tried everything to avoid hormone replacement therapy. I tried chamomile pills. I tried magnesium pills.
Natalie's like, I did that.
CBD.
How did you cross that bridge? What shifted? When did it shift? Was it about new information? Was it about getting to your breaking point?
I did a lot of reading, and I found a doctor actually here in Manhattan who sort of specialized in working with women who were going through menopause. And I talked to her for almost a year.
Yeah.
So, she gave me a bunch of books. She said, I know you're a former journalist. You're going to need to research this. Probably you too, right? So I read all these books about it. I read the study that came out in the early 2000s and was like, God, this is crazy. You actually have a higher likelihood of getting breast cancer from drinking than you do from hormone replacement therapy, but nobody was talking about that. Right now they are, which is great. I'm glad they're calling attention to that issue. But so it took a lot, and then finally I just bit the bullet and did it. I know it's not for everyone, and there are certainly people with health issues that make it harder. But for me, it was the only thing that worked.
And that was a shift.
Huge shift.
Well, and I don't know about if either of you experienced this, but I mean, I'm a progressive woman and I talk about everything with my friends. And somehow we just really hadn't talked about any of this in advance. It's just like we left it off the table or something. And so I'm curious, as you were starting to go through this, did you have any reference point or any guidance from anyone around you, and how did you ask for that?
I had no reference point. I was 41, so it's not like a lot of my friends were having those conversations. And, as I said to Anne Marie and I were talking before we started recording, and I said, as Gen X women, we're the generation that normalized breast pumping in the workplace, and we're the generation that's normalized menopause, talking about menopause in the workplace. However, it's around now, I'm 55, and now women in their 50s are talking about it. But at 41, no.
I'm listening to you both from just a little bit behind you on the road here. I'm in my late 40s. But I had a hysterectomy about 5 years ago, which means that I haven't had my period since the fall of 2019. And I legitimately just have no idea the degree to which my body will or has the menopause may be up ahead. I may have crossed it already. I do experience colleagues every day experiencing aspects of their menstrual cycle, right? And I experience colleagues going through this transition in particular. And it is a transition that involves all kinds of side effects that have immediate impact. And it also involves an incredible identity shift. And we just don't talk about it at all with each other, not in the lunchroom. There's no lunch and learn that the larger company holds. I mean, we have some ERG called wisdom here for people over 40, but that's as close as we get to any transitions that are age-related, right? And I think we're pretty good at it here at LinkedIn. I want to talk a little bit about the impact that this had in the moment and then after that on the career decisions you made. And Anne Marie, I want to start with you. So there you are in 2020. So I presume working from home, which I guess would at least allow you to hide some things if you wanted to.
Yeah, working from home initially, but then we were back in the office as the leadership team. I was tired. And so I think for sure, in the moment, I was, I probably wasn't my best self, and that's exactly who you want to be every day, right? Like you're an overachiever. You want to show up as your best self every day. And I mean, how do you do that when you're getting maybe 5 hours of sleep a week and you're working 80 or 90 hours a week? I mean, it's just the math doesn't work on that. And so
that's more than tired. That's the kind of exhaustion
it
that
was
induces
crazy. The slightest thing could cause me to break down in tears, with my husband, or even in my office upstairs. I'd be like, I'm just so tired. I don't know how I'm going to get through this project. I don't know how I'm going to get through this 3-hour meeting. And, you're just kind of plowing through it in the hopes that, it would get better. But it really never got better.
Did you tell anyone?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone in the office about it at all. And that was particularly interesting to me because there were a fair amount of women in their late 40s, 50s, even 60s on the leadership team that, when I would sort of bring up it basically was a conversation ender. And that was shocking to me because I was kind of looking for the sisterhood and for any tips or tricks that I could figure out how to employ to survive this period. And there was nothing there, really. And even my own attempts to try to say, like, I'm going to need to take the weekend off, which shouldn't be crazy to take a weekend off, but it was at the time. I couldn't do it. Like the meeting notices just kept landing on the calendar, and I just felt like like if you scuba dive at all, that like when you go like 100 feet underwater, right, you're in this pressurized state, right? I felt like I was in that pressurized state all the time, and it's a crazy way to live.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that the word pause is in menopause and we don't give ourselves that grace to like even reflect, to
Totally.
to factor that in?
Yeah. Well, so at 41, what was your career like? I mean, one thing that differentiates one's early 40s from one's mid 50s is we often haven't yet achieved the seniority. We're on our way to the seniority. Puts you in a different place.
Yeah. So at 41, I had just finished earning a PhD while working full time because I was like, it's just a big paper at the end. So I just finished that and chatted so much about how incredible this particular field was of design management, convinced the university we should be doing something in this space. So what happens in organizations when you say we should do this? They say, great, you do it.
Yeah.
So that's what led to me becoming the founding director of the Strategic Design MBA program. And it was this passion project, and it was great until it wasn't anymore because I wasn't getting the levels of support that would be necessary to grow the program and sustain me. And two things about where I was in my career and how the undetected or unspoken cues were affecting me. What I appreciated at least about when I was menstruating, I had a physical marker that tagged why all of a sudden I was crying, super emotional, right? The week before every cycle, that's what my body triggered, right? In menopause, I have no idea why I'm feeling a little wacky or snappier or emotionally feeling like a yo-yo. There are no more physical markers, or maybe they are, but they just are at different time horizons. And we, as a culture, are not tuned into that. So that part was really hard. But the other part was because my body was starting to produce more testosterone, I had no more F's to give. So kind of the good news, bad news was that I really became a much more feistier advocate of myself and what I needed and what it would take for me to stay in a place professionally, which had been my dream, which I worked so hard to get to, but which ultimately led to me saying, with the help of my husband, who is an executive comp attorney, and so my pillow talk is negotiating for yourself, walked away and started my business. I had started as a side hustle, but figure eight thinking was what I left to really build. So by age 47, so that 6-year period of time, I was passionately growing something that was very entrepreneurial within the institution. And then when I asked for my worth and what I needed and couldn't get it, it was like, okay, let me try something else. And I don't know that I would have had that mindset or internal courage when I was in my 20s. I don't think I would have. So there is that shift in identity that is helpful.
That was very similar to my experience. But, as Gen Xers, right, we were raised to, especially women, right, start in the workforce, work really hard, climb the ladder, get to where you want to go. I mean, we had that like pre-programmed in the DNA, right?
Dolly Parton, 9 to 5.
Yeah. So I mean, it's super hard to like, you hit this moment where, you're going through this physiological change and you're having these symptoms and you've got to literally reprogram yourself to make it okay for yourself to step off the treadmill and say, no, I'm going to do this thing differently
Yes.
now. And that actually was the hardest part for me, was giving myself permission to say, this doesn't work for me anymore, and I am not going to keep suffering through it. So, stepping off and then recalibrating was really a fundamental piece of the journey that is hard. It's really hard.
No, I agree. I had my first world existential crisis at the kitchen table of, if I'm not a professor, what am I? Who am I? Right? Because I realized this wasn't working for me anymore. And there was a fork in the road. I had an option. And I went through a year of a lot of self-work, a lot of mindset work. I say if you're 50% exhilarated and 50% terrified, leap, because the terror will keep you anchored and the exhilaration will keep you optimistic.
It's actually a fairly similar place that you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it is the developmental transition that happens for us as women as we transition into a new stage of life. And I actually love your framing of it. It's something that I've heard before, which is like you have a newfound freedom to just go for the thing, and maybe even hormonal support, body support, to feel more empowered to do that. And what I'm hearing from you, and I think from you, is it's a combination of getting to this place of exasperation where what has worked is not working, and having a newfound confidence that the only way forward is to trust yourself and try something new. How did that manifest for you? Tell us about your transition from Xerox.
I literally had 3 sort of offers like in the next 2 weeks. People who are like, we would hire you immediately to be our comms leader, and I had to like sort of say to my husband, like, I need to stop. Like, this train needs to stop. Okay, because I could just jump on another train, but I don't think that's going to actually be the right route for me.
Yeah.
And so I really just like hit pause, and for the first time in my entire life, and said, I'm going to think about this. And it almost like a sign from God. A couple of people after I posted on LinkedIn that I had left Xerox immediately reached out and said, are you going to do any consulting? We would hire you in a minute. And I was like, interesting. Maybe I'll do some consulting while I hit pause. And then, after a month or so of that, I set up shop. And now it's been 4 years, and I've had lots of clients and done really great work. And, I've been able to reorient my life to have more balance, to be healthier from a eating and exercise perspective, to have better relationships with people because I can be present in a way that I wasn't present when I was exhausted and working 80 hours a week.
When you were at the point of sort of biggest transition, what would have been different for you if the people around you would have not just felt like safe people to talk about it too, but been proactive about talking about it?
I've been thinking a lot about this. I feel like menopause is like any other chronic health condition, right? Like if you had rheumatoid arthritis or diabetes or anything else that was a recurring potential thing that you needed to like change your work hours or something for, like your workplace would theoretically be okay with it, right? There's was such a stigma attached to menopause that no one even said the word, right? Like my mother called it the change.
She said softly.
Right. And she whispered it like, I'm going through the change. So, I mean, it's been a societal thing, but it is a health condition that women go through. Some women get more symptoms than other women. Some women go through it in a year or two and then they're done. It's a fact of life, right? Look, you didn't bring it on. It happened.
Yeah.
Natalie, do you agree?
Well, I think it's interesting that the health conditions you listed, diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis, are diseases. Menopause is not a disease, right? Because I was thinking in preparation for our conversation about what are some of the other health conditions that used to be taboo to talk about. So there was a time where you didn't talk about cancer. No, it was this disease that we didn't have a public supportive, normalizing way to talk about it. And people went away and suffered.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, so maybe it's kind of like cancer, but no, it's not like it, because this is not a disease,
But
right?
it's the closest facsimile I think that people have, right? To understand something that isn't a sore throat, right? It's not a cold. We
How
don't have
about-
it for a week.
How about something like neurodivergence? It's just a fact of life that we're coming more into an understanding around, that people work differently and are divergent in the way they think.
Well, not only is it a fact of life, but it's a fact of life that 51% of the human population will go through, right?
Right.
It's
To varying degrees, right?
correct, to varying degrees. But what I think is more interesting is that we don't have language for this. And I think it's cultural, right? It's cultural that we don't give space and time to really not just skirt away from these transitions, but to honor them,
Right.
to talk about them, to give space. We don't do it for girls transitioning into menstruating.
No.
For women, for my friends who have given birth to children, they now years later share how isolating an experience it was for some of them. Your question was like, what would have been different if I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have been feeling as nervous going to have a conversation with my dean about needing time off to have a myomectomy because I have uterine fibroid tumors. There's nothing to be ashamed of about my infertility, about the way my body responded as it was aging, about the surgery. It all is meant to be, but it only gets normalized and surfaces if we can talk about it, if we can have conversations about it.
That was Natalie Nixon and Anne Marie Squeo. Follow both of them on LinkedIn, where they are doing incredible work. And thank you for joining us for the first of what I hope will be a series of menopause conversations, because, y'all, we need to be talking about this more. On that point, I am certain. You know, I have wanted to do this conversation for more than a year. But I had a huge surprise in the studio, something that I didn't expect here today. And it was that realization that menopause isn't just something to be weathered. I hadn't really thought about the opportunities it unlocked. You know, both of our guests today, they had their big, empowering, bold career moves after they started menopause, right? There was something about that experience that allowed them to move into a position of power in their own lives. That's something I want for everyone. Now listen, we're going to talk about this a lot more this week, so I hope you will consider coming to office hours. I'm hosting along with our senior producer, Sarah Storm, and trust me, Sarah is excited for this conversation. We will meet Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern on the LinkedIn news page. You can find a link to that in our show notes, and I hope to see you there. If you heard anything in the last half hour that made you think, or that you didn't know that you would feel comfortable saying aloud yourself, well, that is a good reason to send this episode to someone you care about. On that note, have a really wonderful week, and I'll be right back here in the studio next Monday.